Hello everyone, this is Garry Anthony. It has been some time. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to our Communication in Context. Our discussion for today is about functions, nature, and process of communication. Our objectives defines communication, explains the nature and process of communication, discusses the functions of communication, identifies the speaker's purpose or purposes. What is communication? Webster defines communication as a process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or behavior. Communication is a process of sharing and conveying messages or information from one person to another using different means, medium, context, media, and culture. Communication comes in various forms, from the simple nodding of your head, stretching of hands, raising your eyebrows, up to your daily conversations with your friends over the phone, constant exchange of text messages, and regular browsing in your social networking sites. These are but examples of how humans communicate thoughts, feelings, ideas, and insights. These only signify that humans really engage communication. Let us come to nature of communication. The first one is communication is a process. Communication is a process means it is a step-by-step activity and it is essentially a two-way process that involves the active participation of both the sender and the receiver. It is the act or process of using words, sounds, signs, or behaviors to express or exchange information, to express your ideas, thoughts, feelings to someone else. Communication is a dynamic process which is influenced by the communicator's mood and thinking. It is a complex process too. By complex process, it means one message may be interpreted in many ways by different people. In the sample image, a teacher explains a lesson in a class of 20 students. There may also be 20 different understandings of the lesson. That is why there is a need to seek clarification called feedback. The second nature of communication is much more of an art than science. There is no right or wrong way to communicate, no set of absolute rules to be followed, but there are underlying principles to guide us into effective communication. The third is communication as a sender and receiver. Communication occurs between two or more people, acting as the speaker or the receiver of the message. In other words, it is a two-way process of reaching mutual understanding in which participants do not only exchange information, news, ideas, and feelings, but also create and share meaning. In general, communication is a means of connecting people or places. Number 4, communication is verbal or nonverbal. Communication can be expressed through written or spoken words, or action of both spoken words and nonverbal actions at the same time. Communication is not all about sending or receiving facts in words. It does involve ideas and emotions that are expressed through signs, symbols, and gestures. The image shows both verbal and spoken words and nonverbal actions. The man uses both verbal and nonverbal cues when he winked at the lady and at the same time greeted her and offered her a drink. On the other hand, the girl's smirk is a gesture of disgust or dislike. Even without the use of words, the lady's gesture is still understood as a form of communicating her disapproval towards the man. Number 5. Communication is inevitable. Inevitability means communication is taking place even when someone does not want or intend to communicate. This does not want to communicate feeling of someone actually does communicate something. What does this mean? It simply means that you cannot avoid communicating. Why? The truth is, we are communicating constantly because even when you do not want to communicate, you are communicating. Isn't that ironic? Yes. You are sending a message by the way you smile or frown, sit or move, or by the way you walk or dress up yourself and by your actions. Take a look at this picture. Even when you are sleeping in class, you are communicating that you are either bored or sick or whatever your reasons be. This notion tells us that communication is everywhere. Thus, it is impossible to not communicate. The dark clouds, the deep blue sea, the howling dogs, your empty room, or even the silence of the night, these are all communicating and telling us something. Number 6, communication is irreversible. This means that what you have said can never be unsaid. Irreversibility happens the very minute you click the OK button for a comment or post on your social media, and that would be too late to take back when a lot of people have already reacted and commented to it. The same thing when you perhaps throw a hurting or offensive word to your enemy because of your anger. You can later be sorry for what you have said, but once the damage has already been done, it can never be undone. You may ask for forgiveness or say you did not mean what you said, but it takes time for another person to heal and forget. That person may forgive you for what you have said, but the effect of what you have said is lasting. This characteristic of communication implies that as senders of message, we must be careful and choose the appropriate words to say before saying them. Number 7, communication is unrepeatable. Unrepeatability means that an act of communication can never be duplicated. We may say the same thing over and over again, but the effect of what you said the second or third or fourth time will not be the same as the first time you said it. Even if we intend to say the same thing again, which is possible, but the idea here is the outer world has changed by the second utterance. The listeners may be different. Our mood may be different. Our relationship might be in a different place. You don't get a second chance to make a first impression. One of the best examples is at home when you hear your mother or sister rant about your laziness. The first time you heard it, your reaction would have been bad. You probably cried or stayed in your bedroom for the whole day. But when you heard it the second time or third or fourth, there is that different effect. You probably wouldn't react to it at all like in the picture, or perhaps just laugh it out. The sure thing is you cannot duplicate an act of communication. This time, let's take a closer look to the illustration on how the communication process takes place in any given situation. The diagram of natural flow of the communication process. The first, speaker generates an idea. The speaker encodes an idea or converts the idea into words or action. The speaker transmits or sends out a message. The receiver gets the message. The receiver decodes or interprets the message based on the context. The receiver sends or provides feedback. Now, diagram 2, Sheena and Nico friendship and love story. The diagram showed the communication process and the communication flow between Nico and Sheena. Sheena, being the sender, expresses her feelings for Nico, her suitor, but only as a friend. Nico, the receiver, was hurt upon receiving Sheena's message. See, this is how simple communication process goes. We actually do this every day, right? As you can see in diagram 3, communication goes through a certain process involving the sender, who is the source of the message. The message, which is the shared information. The receiver, whose function is to decode the meaning of what was received, and of course, the feedback, referring to the receiver's reply to the message. Elements of communication. Communication is composed of elements that help us better understand its process. The first one is the sender. The sender is also known as the source of the message or information. The sender is responsible for putting meaning into his or her message. A sender is also known as the speaker or the encoder. In the illustration, you will see the teacher being labeled as the sender since she is the one giving the information to her audience. The second one is the message. The message is the information, ideas, or thoughts conveyed by the speaker in words or in action. As in the illustration, the message is all about communication, which is the lesson of the day. The message, by the way, is an important element that is being shared by the sender to the receiver. The third one is encoding. This is referring to the process of converting the message into words, actions, or other forms that the speaker understands. The sender is also considered as the encoder in the illustration shown because it is her who puts meaning into her message. Number 4 is channel. The channel is the medium or the means such as personal or non-personal, verbal or non-verbal, wherein the encoded message is conveyed. In the example, the channel or the medium of communication or how the message was conveyed is through personal or face-to-face communication using verbal language. Other channels of communication will be discussed in the succeeding videos. Number 5 is decoding. Decoding is the process of interpreting the encoded message of the speaker by the receiver. The receiver analyzes the message received before giving his or her response. In the illustration, there are actually several recipients or receivers of the message, but directly the teacher addressed Mr. Lance Dacer. This suggests that the teacher as the sender is expecting Lance Dacer as the receiver to give his feedback or response. Number 6, receiver. The receiver acts as the recipient of the message or someone who decodes the message. Again, all those present in the class are considered receivers of the message. Number 7, the feedback. Feedbacks are the reactions, responses, or information provided by the receiver. It could come in many forms. It could be through words, gestures, or actions. If you look at the illustration, There are implicit or not direct feedbacks, such as one student is jokingly courting his seatmate. The misbehavior of the student while the discussion is going on is already a feedback in itself. It suggests that the student's attention was not on the teacher but on his seatmate. Number 8, context. Context is the environment where communication takes place. It is a communication situation. If we are to look again at the illustration, we can say at once that the setting is in the classroom, which is true. Why? The presence of the teacher, the students, the discussion are taking place in a classroom setting. Without context, communication cannot take place. There has to be a context for communication to happen. In a picnic, in a wedding, in a church or dinner, at a basketball game or a bus ride are just a few of the many contexts where communication can take place. 9. Barrier. Barriers are also called noise in communication. These are factors that affect the flow of communication. Students talking to one another while the class discussion is going may distract the attention of other students. Or someone who has a toothache may not be able to concentrate at the meeting. In the illustration, one student is not attentive to the class as she was instead bothered by the thought of someone she hates. Oh, did you understand the discussion so far? You and I can actively take part in any communication situation. Now that you know the roles of these elements, where you could either be the sender or the receiver, or the encoder or the decoder of the message, you might as well be attentive to the message you are going to send or receive. Use appropriate channel in conveying your message. Give proper feedback, eliminate the barriers, and of course, always know what communication context you are in. As I have mentioned earlier, we have learned the nature and various elements involved in the process of communication. This time, let us look at how communication works. Let us have the 5 basic functions of communication. Number 1, regulation or control. Communication can be used to control human behavior. It can be used to regulate the nature and amount of activities humans engage in. It ranges from simple requests to laws governing countries and large territories. Using communication to regulate or control means to use verbal and nonverbal cues to manage an individual or group. This kind of communication is meant to encourage the other person to reciprocate, encouraging or positive feedback from the initial interaction. This kind of communication also controls the behavior of person, and this control will adhere to the rules or culture practices of their organization, group, or fellowship. For an example, an interviewee trying to control herself to meet the expectations set by the interviewer. The interviewee changes her behavior according to how the interviewer manages the conversation. Number 2, social interaction. Communication allows acting and reacting to the behavior of people around us. By revealing our thoughts and feelings, we elicit reactions from others. One of the reasons why we communicate is to connect with others or with ourselves. Social interaction and emotional expressions are the most used form of communication we use. We use it every day when we hold conversations with our friends or classmates, or when we express how we feel when we felt offended, or when we feel happy and state our opinion. However, the way we communicate with others will depend on how close we are to them or how much we value them. How you talk to your best friend will be very different on how you talk to someone you just met or to someone with high authority. Number three, emotional expression. Communication makes possible the release or unloading of emotions, resulting in catharsis. It facilitates people's expressions of feelings and emotion. Emotional expression is also a form of communication, as with how you talk with someone depending on your relationship with that person. Emotional expression can also be communicated differently depending on how emotionally close you are to the person. Number four is motivation. The energy that influences a person's behavior in different ways to his pursuit of his goal or objective. It encourages people to live better. To motivate means to stimulate people to act on their goals. However, the motivational kind of communication can work in two ways, positive or negative motivation. Positive motivation happens when the speaker who is motivating someone or a group uses his or her skills in communication as a bridge towards self assessment, confidence, knowledge, etc. Negative motivation, on the other hand, can lead either to communication apprehension, social anxiety, shyness, or public speaking anxiety. Communication anxiety happens when a person becomes fearful of communicating with another person or a group. This fear is either imagined or real and may have rooted from the previous experience. Signs of apprehensions include sweetly palms of feeling upset, stomachs also known as butterflies in the stomachs. These physical signs motivate someone to avoid communication or feel anxious when forced to communicate. Context apprehension happens when anxiety to communicate in certain situations, only such as interpersonal, small group, or public speaking. Fear of public speaking is also called stage fright. This is when a person hesitates or avoids speaking in front of a large group or large audience. The next is shyness. This happens when you feel uncomfortable when speaking to a small group of people. Shy people are afraid to initiate communication or actively participate in small group discussions. Lastly, we have social anxiety, which is when someone hesitates interpersonal communication. This kind of anxiety happens when a person feels threatened and scared of what other people say or think about them. Number five, information dissemination. It is the most basic function of communication that provides data and information for effective completion of tasks, solution of problems, and elimination of uncertainty. Information exchange is the core reason why we communicate. Information is needed for an individual to build a harmonious relationship with others and with its environment. Information and communication will always be linked to each other. These are the five functions of communication. As effective communicator, you must set your goal as to what you want to achieve before you proceed to what you can utilize your knowledge in verbal and nonverbal cues to your advantage. Purposes of communication. The purposes of communication can be effectively realized and fulfilled by using different kinds of talks. Number one, small talk is a form of non-threatening communication that may be used to affect social interaction. The purpose to attain the status quo, to break the ice, to get acquainted, and to establish relationship. Number two, Light control talk is the tactful use of power to get results and may be used to motivate people. The purposes to persuade, to direct, to seek but not force agreement, and to use legitimate authority. Number three, heavy control talk is designed to place blame and to control or regulate people. This creates defensiveness on the part of the receiver and is rarely, if ever, appropriate. Purposes to blame, to attack, to threaten, to coerce, and to demand. Number four, search talk is another non-threatening approach when you want to gather data or the consensus of others to be able to provide information. Purposes, center or an issue, and to examine and clarify the issue. 5. Straight talk is good for problem solving and conflict resolution and may be used to facilitate emotional expression for catharsis, which is the act of purging, cleansing, and unloading of ideas and emotions. So let's sum up. Here are the key points tackled in the video. Communication is a process of sharing and exchanging information from one person to another using media, whether written, oral, verbal, or non-verbal. Communication can be through face-to-face, phone conversation, a group discussion, a meeting or interview, a letter correspondence, a class recitation, and many others. Communication is a two-way process involving the elements of communication, the sender, receiver, encoding, decoding, channel, message, context, feedback, and barrier. There are 5 basic functions of communications, namely control, social interaction, motivation, emotional expression, and information dissemination, respectively. Different kinds of talks, according to Locke, effectively fulfill the purposes of communications. These talks are dubbed as small, light control, heavy control, search, and straight talks. And that ends the discussion of the nature, functions, and process of communication. Till next time, and don't forget to hit subscribe and the bell button. Goodbye. Thank you for watching.